upaya ashrayam hasto ruhu hatostasya nana karma chikirshaya tayos tu balavan indra anadam upashrayam hasto ruhu hatostasya nana karma chikirshaya tayos tu balavan indra anadam upayashrayam hasto ruhu hatustasya nana karma chikirshaya tayos tu balavan indra anadam upashrayam
Hastoru hatastasya
Hasturu tastasya
Nana karma chikirshaya
Nana karma chikirshaya
Hastu balavan indra
Tayos tu balavan indra
Adanam ubayashayam
Anadam upayashrayam
Astoruru hatastasya
Hasturu tastasya
Nana karma chikirshaya Dayostu balavan indra
Tu balavan indra
Adhanam ubhayashayam
Tam parashrayam
Hastaururu hatustasya
Hasturu atustasya
Nana karma chikirshaya
Nana karma chikirshaya
Tayostu balavan indra
Tayos tu balavan indra
Adhanam ubhayashrayam
Anandam upayashrayam
Hastoruru hatastasya
Hastoru rastasya
Nana karma chikirshaya
Nana karma chikirshaya
Tayostu balavan indra
Tayos tu balavan indra
Adanam upayasrayam
Anandam upayashrayam
Astoruru hatustasya
Hastoru tastasya
Nana karma chikirshaya
Nana karma chikirshaya
Tayostu balavanindra
Tayos tu balavan indra
Adanam ubayashrayam
Anandam upayashrayam
Hastaru hatastasya
Hastoru tastasya
Nana karma chikirshaya
Nana karma chikirshaya
Tayostu balavan indra
Tayos tu balavan indra
Adhanam ubayashrayam
Anandam upayashrayam
Hastaururu hatastasya
Hastoru tastasya
Nana karma chikirshaya
Nana karma chikirshaya
Tayostu balavan indra
Tayos tu balavan indra
Adhanam ubhayasrayam
Anandam upayashrayam
Astoruru hatustasya
Hasturu tastasya
Nana karma chakirshaya
Nana karma chikirshaya
Tayostu balavan indra
Tayos tu balavan indra
Adhanam ubayashrayam
Nanam upayashrayam
Hastoru hatustasya
Hastoru tastasya
Nana karma chikirshaya
Nana karma chikirshaya
Tayostu balavan indra
Tayos tu balavan indra
Adhanam upayashrayam
Anandam upayashrayam
Ashtaru
Rutastasya
Nana karma chikirshaya.
Nana Karma Chikirshaya
Tayastu balavanindra.
Tayastu Balavanindra
Aranam uba hayashayam.
Ananamupayashrayam. So that's everyone chanting. I'll chant the word by word synonyms. Hasto, the hands. Ruhatu, manifested. Tasya, his. Nana, various. Karma, work. Chakirshaya, being so desirous. Tayo, of them. To, however. Balavan, to give strength. Indra, the demigods in heaven. Ananam, activities of the hand. Upayashrayam, dependent on both the demigod and the hand. Jai Shishi Gora Nitai Ki Jai. Thereafter, when the Supreme Person desired to perform varieties of work, the two hands in their controlling strength, and Indra, the demigod in heaven, became manifested, as also the acts dependent on both the hands and the demigod. Purport: in every item we can note with profit that the sense organs of the living entity are never independent at any stage. The Lord is known as the Lord of the senses, Harishikesh. Thus, the sense organs of the living entities are manifested by the will of the Lord. And each organ is controlled by a certain type of demigod. No one, therefore, can claim any proprietorship of the senses. The living entity is controlled by the senses. The senses are controlled by the demigods, and the demigods are the servants of the Supreme Lord. That is the arrangement in the system of creation. The whole thing is controlled ultimately by the Supreme Lord, and there is no independence either in the material nature or of the living entity. The illusioned living entity who claims to be the Lord of the senses is under the clutches of the external energy of the Lord. As long as a living entity continues to be puffed up by his tiny existence, he is to be understood to be under the stringent control of the external energy of the Lord, and there's no question of liberation from the clutches of illusion, Maya, however much one may declare himself a liberated soul. So yeah, this is a really nice verse. So I listened to a really good lecture on this. It was someone I've been listening to already, Prahladananda Swami. And so the first thing he mentioned was this word here, hasto, right? Hastu, right? He said basically it would be a hasto, right, if there was an O at the end, but it's a hastau, right, because it's a A-U, and hastau, the pronunciation. So he mentioned that, pointed that out. And then he pointed out the verses in Bhagavad Gita that how the liberated person, he's working with his senses, right? So while working, walking, and evacuating, right? He always knows within himself that he actually is not the doer and that he actually does nothing, that actually everything's being carried out by material nature. You know that verse? Right? You're familiar with that verse? So he pointed that out, and he mentioned that there are 5 factors of action. So we know what that is, right? There's the place, the activity, the doer, or what else is there? Yeah, ultimately the super soul, right? So there's the 5 factors of action, right? And then what he was mentioning, he was talking about how we have the thinking, feeling, and willing. So basically, all of the actions, whether it's pious or impious, are all originated from within the mind. So basically, this is really where we're really determining our destiny, is by creation of our karma, by the subtle form of the desire in the mind. And so then, because of the specific quality of the thoughts and what we're thinking about, there'll be some specific feelings. So that's thinking, feeling, and the next one is willing. And one is willing to do so. So then it's transferred over to the intelligence. So the intelligence, if it's for sense gratification, lust the intelligence, right? It's one of the places of lust, the mind, senses, and intelligence. So we'll devise the means and ways to fulfill this specific desire. So he said basically the living entity doesn't actually do anything, but that the Supreme Lord knows the living entity's desire, just as the wind is carrying an aroma, right? So the super soul senses the living entity's desire this way, right? In a subtle form. And so, let's see, what else was he saying? So he was saying, basically, it would be nonsensical to try to do something, try to attempt something that the body's not capable of, like flying. So basically, if you just tried to fly by yourself, it's basically a waste of time. I don't know, did you guys ever do this? Did you get up cardboard wings or something and try to, I actually really succeeded to kind of, skid on my tippy toes. And they go, the guy is flying. He really is flying. That kid's flying. So anyways, that was fun. I even spray painted it. I was really proud of it. Spray painted it blue. Somebody gave me a can of blue spray paint. So he said basically what we'd have to do is make some arrangements, some other material arrangements, like building an airplane. And in that way we can fly, but we can't fly independently. Unless you have mystic cities, the mystic cities in that you can fly, right? Otherwise, then it's not possible. So we have these specific different desires like that. So let's see, what else was I thinking? Thinking, feeling, willing. Listening to some pretty good points. So that kind of pretty much got me started right there. Maya Dakshina Prakrita. Where Krishna says, this is under my direction, O son of Kunti, right? This material cosmic manifestation is working under my direction, that Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, right? So, that's the other point that I want to get to. Is that in previous verses, maybe even in the next chapter, last chapter we were reading, they were stating that the living entities or the movements of the material energy, the movements of Maya, right, or Prakriti in nature, are shadowing the movements of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Just like you have a shadow, like you walk along, right, and you have a shadow. So that's the same way as that the material energy of Maya is like the back side of Krishna, or the Krishna's shadow. So because Krishna is moving, then the nature, it's also in movement in the same way, but in a perverted form. Everything that's within the spiritual world is within the material world, except there's more varieties in the spiritual world than there are here in the material world. Alankar was saying that Prabhupada said there's even more colors and more sounds than what's available here. Because I heard that there's more fruits and vegetables, more varieties of fruits and vegetables than we have here. But if you're talking about more colors and more sound, so that's pretty far out. And so it's for eternity, ever and ever and ever, and ever increasing spiritual happiness and bliss in association with Krishna and Krishna's loving devotional service, engaging in his pastimes. So, so that way, all the senses are becoming manifested by the desire of the universal form of the Lord, the Purusha avatar, right? So there's the Purusha Shukta that we read about, Purusha Shukta confirmed. So we've been really discussing a lot on the universal form, and now we're even going more into details of the universal form. And not only that, but because there's a specific structure, a hierarchy of manifestation, everything actually occurred simultaneously when Brahma created the universe. So keep that in mind too. Now this all simultaneously occurred, although there's a hierarchy of manifestation. So here we're reading about how the hands became manifested because the Virat Rupa, the universal form, desired to perform activities with his hands. So there's the knowledge acquiring senses and the working senses. So that's the breakdown. We'll be getting that into third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. This is the last chapter, second canto. So there's the material ingredients of the Sankhya philosophy, or metaphysical society of the Devahuti Kapila, not the imposter atheist Kapila, who has also presented a philosophy of metaphysics. But the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the incarnation, is the Devahuti Kapila. So he explains how I just discussed 10 of the elements, which were the 5 knowledge acquiring senses, and then there's the 5 working senses, and there's the mind. So that makes 11, right? And then you have, intelligence and false ego. So that makes 13. And then there's api, vayu, right? Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego. So we have 13 plus 8. So let's see, 13, that's 16, and another 5, 21. Oh, and then ultimately the spiritual soul, and ultimately the super soul, right? So you got, because that's the atheist Kapila, they're just examining the material elements and not including the soul, the Jiva Atma, and the Paramatma. A Paramatma in each and every atom, Krishna, Dakshay Vishnu, within the heart of the living entity in each and every atom, is actually in control of material nature. So the tiny little puffed up guys, right, because that's what he was mentioning. I'm trying to remember exactly what he said about that. But those people who are, due to the ego, right, are identifying as being the doer when we're actually the non-doer, being the spiritual soul. Everything's actually being carried out by nature, the demigods, and ultimately the Virat Rupa, or Krishna himself, super soul. So they're engaging in material activities, not knowing or understanding. Well, it's a misdirected civilization, as explained at the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam. Then the Kali Yuga was short-lived, unlucky, misguided. So so the Srimad Bhagavatam is to be presented to rectify the misdirected, misguided civilization. You know, our so-called leaders. They're only just simply Sudra. Prabhupada said in the Kali Yuga, was it Kalos Sudra Sambhava? In this age of Kali Yuga, everyone is just simply born a Sudra. But the actual real process is that the Brahmana is the head of society, and qualified Kshatriyas are the arms of the universal form, and the Vaishyas, cow protection, mercantile business, agriculture, producing of cotton and wool for clothing. This belongs to the Vaishyas. And then the Sudras are the legs, and they're to support and assist the 3 higher classes. But in this age, the Sudras, the bigger dog, is being elected by the smaller dogs. And then Prabhupada said, as soon as their senses are not satisfied with their leader, then impeachment. They'll step down now, and we'll elect another big dog like that. So, let's see. It just came to my mind. I was thinking what he was talking about that, but Krishna. Prabhupada was mentioning this same verse in Krishna, the Reservoir of Pleasure. Maya Dakshayana Prakata Shratra Tram. You know that verse? But where Krishna says, everything is under my direction. So Prabhupada was saying, just like a computer system, You need a scientist to operate the computer, or the computer operator, or the PC specialist, right? Someone who knows how to operate the computer. Nowadays, they've made it very easy and very intuitive. In fact, I was going to computer school, and I went to school one night, and all the day students were down in the lobby, and I was getting there on time, so there wasn't anything peculiar about that. So when I went upstairs, and it looked like the staff there carrying their pictures from the walls, and they go, where are you going? I'm going to class. And they go, oh no, the school just closed. I go, closed, right? Is that they just made it so easy. And the other school I was taking was PC specialist. I completed it. It was mail order, distance education. But they closed. It's just that everything's become so intuitive and everything. You don't need to go to school how to do this stuff anymore. It's just all right there. Or peer to peer. The graphical user interface is just simply. You don't need so much higher training for it anymore. So now, but you still need to have some sort of familiarity with it, some sort of knowledge with it. But somebody is operating it, and someone's under control of it. So that's Krishna, the universal form of the manifestation, and its operations, the indriyas. So indriyas refer to the senses. So there's the, if I could think of what this is, the mind and the senses and the self. So the way that he was explaining in False Ego how the self is desiring, so then the Supreme Personality of God in the form of Supersoul senses the desires, the air carries aromas, and allows the demigods, or gives the demigods the instruction, according to one's karma, what they can deserve, will guide their senses to the sense objects. So there's the subtle sense objects was also described too, right? That they also became manifested, and that was associated with the Lord's mind, right? The subtle senses, the sense objects, or each element and each sense and the sense object was all manifested. Like first there was the light and the organ to see, vision, and the sight itself, right? So you have the sight of the vision, or the subtle sense objects, and the actual senses, and the perception, or the ability to perceive through each of the senses. So then there's the sound, the ears, and the ether, right? They all became manifest, right? So this is what we're discussing. And Krishna states in Bhagavad Gita that according to one's desire, one develops a particular set of senses which is grouped about the mind. Also, Krishna states in Bhagavad Gita that one who controls, restrains his senses of action, his senses and organs of action, but within whose mind dwells on sense objects, certainly deludes himself, and is called a pretender. Right? And so then we were discussing there's a process. According to your specific desire in your mind, your specific feelings that gives you, right? Certain thoughts give you certain feelings. Think angry thoughts, right? Unfair thoughts, all this stuff that, right? You get angry, right? Or if you think about, well, you know what, then, you're going to get lusty. Lusty mind, lusty intelligence, and lusty senses. These are the sitting places of lust. So Krishna tells Arjuna that what is it with the sword of knowledge? You cut down this great destroyer of religion, lust, and sin. Right? So everything's all cut out for us. We have got our program, we've got Prabhupada's books and his instructions and his elaborate purports. Everything's all cut out for us. Do the Bhakti program, right? Gauri Nitai Ki Jai. Get trained up, right? It's all just right here. You don't have to get on the mental platform about what we should do or what we shouldn't do, right? It's already all cut out right here. There's the do's and the don'ts, the yamas and the niyamas, right? Just like in the Patanjali yoga system that Krishna was explaining. And even then, it was completely ancient yoga system when Krishna was explaining it in Bhagavad Gita. So it's it's an eightfold yoga system. So there's the yamas and the niyamas. There's the do's and the don'ts. So basically, we're saying no illicit sex, no meat eating, no intoxication, no gambling, right? And that's really all pretty much condensed in that. So no meat eating corresponds with compassion or non-violence, right? So that's what Buddha was presenting, right? Even though we know from Srimad Bhagavatam that Buddha is an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of God, he's Vishnu Tattva, although the Buddhists don't accept Buddha as God, but it's more or less a nihilistic philosophy, so we don't accept the philosophy, we accept it as being atheistic, but there's a specific purpose for the specific teachings. But there's a specific sutras. So he tricked the Buddhists into worshiping Vishnu, right, without their knowledge, by some, by his specific yoga sutras. And then from zero, there was the 9 principles of Buddhism. I was just reading about this in Chaitanya Charitamrita, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur it was explaining these specific 9 points. But the universe is eternally manifest and non-manifest. And there was never a first time when the material universe became manifested, because that's a material concept, that it's within eternity, right? Is that there's no beginning and there's no end. So actually there was no beginning and no end to the manifestation and non-manifestation of the Mahatattva and this specific process in which we're reading about. And let's see, what time is it? What else? So the puffed up living entities in its tiny existence, he thinks he's the controller, but he's smashed down. Ultimately, when Krishna comes to the time of death, he takes everything away like that. But, we see many people, they're pretty puffed up. Like big giant demons like Hiranyakashipu, who's the big ruler, big king of the entire planet. Yeah, and like Bali Maharaj and Hiranyakashipu, they conquered like the demigods and the whole entire universe and make them pay homage unto them, right? Probably, like that. So the demigods are requesting the Supreme Lord that the universal affairs are simply becoming disrupted because of the influence of these demon rulers, these kings, right? And so, when you listen to Hiranyakashipu had some pretty good philosophy, except for the point that he was thinking that he's the greatest, right? And Prabhupada was saying that although it's compared, Prabhupada's comparing this to the living entity being within the material body. And you get the material body according to your karma, according to what you deserve and what you desire. So he's saying that just like a rented apartment. So somebody's decorating the apartment like they're going to live there forever. They're never going to have to leave. But as soon as, your rent's up, right? Your lease is over and your rent's up, then you have to leave. You have to leave the apartment. You can't keep it. So it's the same thing. The material body is rented apartment. When Krishna says, okay, that's it, right? Then you have to leave. So we're talking about being God conscious or Krishna conscious, because at that particular time of point, which we don't know when that will be, it can be in a minute, it can be in the next 5 minutes, next 5 hours, next 5 days, next 5 months, next 5 years, right? We just don't know, right? It can take place at any time. But so to be God conscious or Krishna conscious, one would be prepared for the ultimate test at that specific time when one has to leave the body, that one will think about Krishna naturally at that specific crucial point of leaving the body. So it's the natural, easy psychological process of remembering Krishna always. So that's part of the Patanjali yoga system that Krishna was also describing as smarnam. Krishna smarnam. There's what is it? The verses. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smarnam Pada Sevanam Archer Vandana Dasya, becoming the Lord's devotee, hearing, chanting, remembering, Smarnam, then there's Dharanya, let's see, Dharanya, Dharanya, and then Samadhi, right? So there's so it leads to samadhi, means always thinking about Krishna. So there used to be this phrase that everybody was always mentioning all the time. There's two sides of this, the coin. Always think of Krishna and never forget Krishna, right? So you'll never forget Krishna if you're always thinking about Krishna. So thereby Krishna performs his pastimes to attract the conditioned souls. You know, we have something to think about. Krishna's form, right? You know, we can think about our service, how to decorate the Lord nicely, you know, how to wash the pots nicely, you know, like that. Manage our time in devotional service, you know, as our maintaining the body so that we remain fit for engaging in devotional service. Being clean, being clean, truthful, cleanliness, austerity, truthfulness. There's quite a few points on there like that. Mercifulness, nonviolence. So those qualities are always present within the possession of a devotee. The devotee possesses these qualities, right? And he never forgets Krishna, or remembering Krishna. Remembrance, concentration. So that's dharanya, dana, concentration, meditation, and samadhi. So does anybody have any questions or comments? Or yeah, you have a question?
I was wondering, why don't the atheist Sankhya philosophers study the soul at least?
Yeah, because that's just not their school of knowledge. You know, just like the scientists, you know, or the philosophers, or you know, the politicians. You know, basically what they're saying is, okay, you know, this is what we're observing, and here's our thesis on it, and here's the basis for our thesis by some specific observation, you know, like that. They apply some filters, you know, over the Hubble telescope, right? Or, you know, or look at things different ways. Look at the X-rays, look at the ultraviolet rays, you know, different perspectives, you know, looking at the same thing in a different way, right? But they're just examining what's present, you know, what can be perceived by the senses, right? So because God cannot be directly perceived by the senses or the materially contaminated senses without devotional service or without proper knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you can't perceive Him, can't perceive God. So they're saying, well, if you want God, if you want religion, then go to a temple or a church, right? But yeah, they're not the ones who are, you know, going to explain that, because they don't have that knowledge or information. It's not observable by the senses, right? It's not tangible like that. So, you know, it would be considered to be unscientific to bring in the process or the you know, a description of an entity that can't be observed, like that. They can't observe the soul, you know. So according to material viewpoint, when the body dies, right? If you're the body, then you're just dust. That's it. Blink, you turn off, clean, zzz, flat line, right? But the spiritual soul actually leaves the material body. In fact, I was remembering this. Satsrup Das Goswami was asked a question about heart transplant. And he explained that, Prabhupada kind of explained this too, that, it's like which living entity is entering the body now when they do a heart transplant. And it was like saying something like, if you came along and said, okay, that chair's broken, sir, can you please stand up a moment while I give you a new chair? Right, okay, you can sit down now. He was saying like that, about the heart transplant. We're just asking the spiritual soul to just, momentarily, could you please get up and put in the heart transplant? Okay, here, take your seat. But Prabhupada was stating this all the time. Death is at that particular point when we leave the body and we don't come back. We just don't wake up. But we're leaving our bodies every night when we go to sleep and we have our dream, right? And then we again come back to our body. So Prabhupada was saying like that takes place every night. But death is just when you leave your body and this time you don't come back. Right, and in fact, it could be a little more treacherous than that, as explained in the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam for the sinful living activities of the sinful person. It's arrested by the Yama Dutas, but the devotees see the Vishnu Dutas. You had a question? A comment?
You reminded me of yesterday. I had this conversation with the lady at the hospital, and she was saying how she's ready to die, and that she doesn't think she was telling me she doesn't think there's heaven. And then she said, she basically says we're like reborn again, like, reincarnation.
Right, reincarnation, yeah.
Yeah. And then she was saying, that she talked to some astrophysicists or something and asked them, where's your favorite part of the universe? And then she asked them where's heaven? And then what you were saying earlier about these scientists that inquire about, they say you can't see that it's not observable, so we can't study it. And I was thinking, well, the point that we have to mention next is that you have to become qualified to see it, to see these things. You have to make yourself qualified to see these things. Just as the scientists, they have to study for 10, 15, 20 years, to become qualified to understand these higher level equations and what's happening. Just as the spiritualist has to practice for many years to purify themselves of all the things that are holding them back from being qualified to see Paramatma and the spiritual spark within every living entity. Like we see in the Bhagavad Gita, the one who is qualified can see the soul within a gentle Brahmin, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and the dog eater. Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought of that verse the other day. There was this dog who was on the porch, and he was running more in the yard, and I was looking to see if he was on a rope or a chain, right? And he was barking, right? He looked like he'd be a friendly dog too, but he looked like he was seriously barking. So, I'm like chanting, and the dogs, they pick up on your vibes, No, so I'm thinking about, the spiritual soul, and, there's the dog, learned, gentle Brahmin is here in Kansas City. He sees super soul within a barking dog on the porch, right? Lady pushing baby basket, mailman driving mail truck, delivering mail, sees with equal vision, like that. The tree, there's a tree there. Oh yeah, and then there's a squirrel. Right, so he's the spiritual soul and Paramatma, and other living entities. So basically, I just, because dogs pick up on this, I just felt like, okay, love and happiness, just, put a smile. And the dog stops barking, kind of like, goes over to the other porch, then, he finishes up. He's got to have the last word, a couple more little roughs. It wasn't like it was before when he first announced his presence. So, I kind of think like that because the animals, they pick up on your vibes, I saw there was a video, what was it? It was a newscaster. And it was at nighttime, and they had the lights, and they thought it was a dog, and it kind of looked like a dog, but it was a mountain lion, a cougar. He comes and walks right past her, right behind her, and kind of goes in the bush on its trail. And, that could be dangerous. I was thinking, fortunately, it's already been fed, wasn't hungry. But there was a snake right in the cavern of... Haridas Thakur, and a lot of people were alarmed and afraid to come see Haridas Thakur in the cave because there was this big giant snake in there, venomous. And so the snake, he picked up on the whole thing and left the cave. So you can have it, a great soul, Hare Krishna, But yeah, that's a real nice analogy. Prabhupada says that too. To see through the knowledge of Scripture, Shastru Chakshusha, with the eyes imbued with the balm of the salve of love, right? So just like we learn under the spiritual master, so just like a journeyman, he learns from the engineer, or what you're saying, the mathematician, the scientist, he learns the higher equations from someone who knows it, his master, he has his license, so that he can get his license and be able to pass the examination. So it's, Prabhupada, he says it's pretty much in the same ways that you must have a spiritual master like that. So, and there was a couple of verses that I had memorized that was kind of appropriate to these verses. One is, it's in the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. The illusory energy of the Lord cannot take precedence, being aware or being ashamed of her position. Those who are bewildered by her always talk nonsense, being absorbed in thoughts of it is I and it is mine. So Prabhupada talks about they're just always talking nonsense. And then in Bhagavad Gita, it's Vishya Vinivartante Nirhashadehina Sarvasamasho Priyasha Param Dristva Nivartante. That the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, though the taste for sense objects remains. But seizing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, he is fixed in consciousness. Right? So you get that higher taste, right? Engaging in devotional service and giving up the lower engagements. Right? So any other questions or comments, or you ever?
I really like the verse that you just quoted at the end to go along with this one.
Oh yeah.
Because you're mentioning how, in the beginning you were talking about how our thinking, feeling, the process for doing anything starts with thinking, then feeling, and then willing. And the whole verse is talking about how our senses are always dependent. So I like that verse, how you're saying, more or less, that those who are under the control of the illusory energy are always talking nonsense. So we see if we engage our senses, which are always dependent anyways, if we engage them in Krishna's service and in being around devotees, then we can actually think of Krishna at the time of death. We can think of something we can actually think of Krishna. So instead of taking birth again in the material world, getting another body. But we see if we associate with anything in this materialistic society, what's the basis of it? Like you were saying, it's just based on ignorance, this idea that I'm the body, so therefore I have to use everything for my enjoyment. So whatever it is, if someone's reading like a self-help book, or watching a show, or hearing a song, or hearing people speaking out in our modern society, it's all based on ignorance. So it doesn't give them any benefit. Just associating with that, they stay here. But if people associate with devotees, then they can go back to the spiritual world because it's all based on, okay, I'm the soul, the soul is a servant of Krishna. So I just thought I'd mention.
Yeah, there's like these self-help books. There's a lot of self-help books on a lot of different fields of knowledge, but there's some that they've made it easy, right? There's a lot of different fields, to fix things, right? The auto mechanics, Windows, Word, Office. But it's like Office for dummies, Word for dummies, automotive for dummies, right? Science for dummies, right? Home improvement for dummies, right? They're reading a self-help series called For Dummies, and we're reading what Prabhupada was saying that, in his printing of his Srimad Bhagavatam, that these books, Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, they're the subject matter for the Paramahamsas, those who are fully engaged in the service of the Lord, right? So we're reading the highest books of knowledge, and they're reading self-help for dummies. Okay. You have a question or comment?
Hare Krishna, I just wanted to add a verse to the conversation. Earlier you were saying that Prabhupada has equipped us with everything that we need. And so I just thought of this verse in First Canto, 2nd chapter, it's verse 19. As soon as irrevocable loving service is established in the heart, the effects of nature's modes of passion and ignorance, such as lust, desire, and hankering, disappear from the heart. Then the devotee is established in goodness, and he becomes completely happy. And then the next verse, I'll just read the next one and then I'll stop. Thus established in the mode of unalloyed goodness, the man whose mind has been enlivened by contact with devotional service to the Lord gains positive scientific knowledge of the personality of Godhead in the stage of liberation from all material association.
Yeah, and that's an irrevocable fact. Yeah, those are the beginning verses. A lot of times devotees, we chant those 4 verses before giving Srimad Bhagavatam class. Nice Jai Pram. Nice. Let's see. Shu. Nityam Bhagavad Sevaya. Yeah. So those are. Oh yeah, and then there's also a comment for your comment. There was a paper called As It Is magazine, right? And Jayadvaita Swami wrote an article about taking birth in the material world again according to our desire and activities. And he was saying, if you're into playing video games, right? And this is like early 80s, the video games are really pretty simple still. Now they're a little more elaborate, but that was like, modern technology going wild at the time, right? They're coming out with they're getting more graphical, more color, and gaining more interest, right? So there's more video arcades and more video machines, more locations, right? More and more people were playing them. So he's saying, yeah, if you're accustomed to playing video games, and if this is what you think at the time of death, then you might take birth as a moth inside one of those video machines. Yeah, they talk about taking birth as a mouse in your old house, or a spider, if you're attached. They were saying, what is it? It's a nectar of devotion, nectar of instruction. The fellow, he had left his body, he had died, and he took his body as a dog, and he came back to the house where he formerly lived, and his former children, his former sons and daughters, threw shoes at him to make it go away, right? So this is the ways of the material world, material nature. You're kicked out, and everything's taken away from you in the form of cruel hands, cruel death. Right, not even reincarnation, is going to help you if you even came back to the same location again. You're attached to your house and your children. They don't recognize you, and you just simply throw shoes. Or due to illusion, someone he thinks sometimes that his departed grandfather has now again taken birth as his son, in his family. I know my best friend's father was he made a lot of money. There was a really wealthy family, a big family too, and everything. He designed those the lighting systems for the traffic control towers for the runway for the airports, right? And so when he was in the Army, he was a detonation specialist, blow up bridges and stuff. And he had an accident, and the doctor said he was going to have to amputate his arm. And he said, "You amputate my arm, I'll kill you." Right? So he didn't consent, right? He didn't consent to having his arm amputated. So his daughter was born without part of her arm and her hand. So he was always thinking that this was because he didn't have his arm amputated by, by the surgeon, like that. Due to illusion somehow or other, you think that we're connected, connected according to our karma. Certain things have happened like that. But, any other thoughts or comments or anything, questions? Okay, I know we're running late. Srimad Bhagavatam class, Ki Joy.